Today on CityCast Boise, libraries are being targeted by Idaho lawmakers, but many of us have rallied to support free access to books. A while back, lead producer Frankie Barnhill talked with a famous Boisean about his love of libraries, novelist Anthony Doerr. They talk about learning civic duty through borrowing public property and why he thinks we need to do more to fight book bans. It's Tuesday, April 4th. I'm Emma Arnold, and this is what Boise is talking about.
Thank you so much for being here. This is so exciting to have you on CityCast Boise. We really appreciate your time.
Oh, I'm so stoked to be here, Frankie. Thank you so much. Your invitation helped me learn about the podcast, and I've been listening ever since. I've learned a bunch, from stuff about lawns to stuff about preserving the sawtooths. So it's a real treat to get to be a part of it.
Oh, well, we're so flattered. So for people who haven't read Cloud Cuckoo Land, I'm going to try to just do a quick little, a few things that people need to know, which includes, of course, that there are these 3 different timelines, 3 different locations, perspectives from, I think it's 5 characters in total. You know, one of the timelines and one of the locations is 15th century Constantinople. There's a future spaceship of some kind, and then Idaho in present day. So why bring Idaho into this particular novel? Why did you decide that?
Thanks, Frankie. Good job describing this novel as a handful, for sure.
It's a lot, yeah.
I started the novel with just 2 characters in the 15th century. Constantinople. These walls around Constantinople stood for 1,100 years, and they withstood 23 sieges. There's people with elephants coming to try to siege the city. And, while these manuscripts of all these old Greek and Roman manuscripts are deteriorating in North Africa and all around Europe, they're preserved inside the libraries, the Imperial Library, the monastic libraries, and private libraries inside the walls of Constantinople. And so I'm trying to tell a story about the preservation of texts and stories. And I've got a character inside the walls in the Byzantine Empire named Anna, this boy named Omir outside the walls. And I'm just working back and forth between the two. And I'm thinking about the 15th century. It's this time of this amazing confluence of technologies. Gunpowder is arriving on the scene and being adopted in Europe. And that's enabling people to knock down these old technologies of walls.
Yeah.
The printing press is like about to show up and blow everybody's minds, because suddenly books won't just be for super rich people. So there's this crazy acceleration brought on by new technologies. As I started to think about how could I tell a story in which, I show how the stewardship of this one old book ricochets down through time, I thought, I've got to choose another time. I got to choose a time when Anna and Omir are long dead and show this book enter the lives of somebody else for whom this text, this little book, will be really important. And what other time, I thought, is this intersection of new technologies really disrupting everything? And I thought, Trump was president. There's Twitter is suddenly so powerful. I'm like, it's now. And then the pandemic comes in right in the middle while I'm working on this thing. And I thought, I'm going to set this in Idaho, in a place where growth is really challenging our ideas about stewardship. Because, why do we have those of us who have been here a little longer, why do we have any more right to live in these mountains than somebody who just moved here this year? And so I invent 2 characters that live in the present day, Zeno and this boy Seymour, who's really attached to the forest behind his house, and try to start asking questions about the disruption that new technologies can bring in the present day as well.
Yeah. Wow. And I mean, it's this just expansive story. I mean, there's just no other way to put it, across all these, different timelines, places. And then Idaho just really centers it. I mean, for being Idaho readers, of course, we really loved that you were talking about a place that probably, it's a fictional town, but it's like McCall, right? That's kind of was the place that you were mimicking it after.
Yeah. I named the town Lakeport, which was an original idea for the name of McCall. But there's probably 5% Coeur d'Alene and 8% Ketchum in there.
Yeah,
and of course, it's an invented place. The library in McCall was very much kind of a prototype for this library, this little humble rural library that plays a big, important role in the novel. I've got this grand virtual library. In the future, I've got these old libraries that are crumbling away in Constantinople. And I really wanted to remind a reader of the power of this tiny rural library, what these libraries mean to people. A library doesn't have to look ultra grand on the outside to play this really important community role.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, definitely want to talk more about libraries, a lot more about libraries, because one of the things your dedication, I'll read it, is for the librarians then, now, and in the years to come. I mean, just this dedication, it seems so incredibly important and applicable right in this moment. I know that you wrote this novel, well, a few years ago, but now we're in this middle of this debate about books and banning and ideas that, are problematic in some way. What does this mean to you to have this book out there now while this conversation is going on right here in Boise?
I think what I really wanted to do is pay homage to libraries because I took them for granted. Often I try to use my work as a way to remind myself of all the things that habit has made kind of invisible to me. And growing up, my mom was a science teacher. I had two older brothers. She used the library as kind of a third place for us to drop us off after school while she would grade papers or try to get some groceries. And the library was really our third home. And as the youngest, I just kind of got to roam around and take out whatever books I wanted to. And sometimes the books were maybe a little quote unquote too advanced for me, or there'd be sex in them or something. But I didn't,
Sure.
I wasn't ready for that, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It was so exciting to be able to learn to take public property home to your private home and learn to take care of it. And, if you spill a little chocolate milk on it, you feel terrible, but you learn to you learn a little civic spirit and bringing those things back. There's something about oh my gosh, I missed my turn in date. I'm in
Yep.
trouble. There's something so sweet about that. The idea that you can go study the work of the masters, take it home for free, participate in sharing something with the rest of the community. Those are all really important lessons. And I took them all for granted. I just assumed that everybody in the world had access to this stuff, that libraries had existed since the beginning of time, of course. And it's only now, into my adulthood that I've realized it's people that keep the lights on in these places. It's people that grow the collections and protect the collections, and that they are stewarding human wisdom through time without editorial judgment. They're just allowing access to information. And of course, now at the internet, libraries play so many important, vital roles in terms of, you need the internet to apply for jobs. You need the internet to interact with the government in many ways. And in places where it gets cold, like Boise used to anyway, you need to enter these places to stay warm. They're the last public space you can go without buying a $6 latte and use the bathroom and be inside. And lo and behold, you might improve yourself while you're in there. There's so many different ways the libraries support our communities, and I wanted to try to remind the reader and remind myself that these are fragile places that need to be protected along the way. And of course, this current debate is an age-old debate. It's a really effective way to get attention for yourself by attacking a book. So in some ways, I worry about the attention some of these quote-unquote book bans are getting because it's like maybe we're publicizing things, giving people attention for bad behavior when we don't really need to shine a spotlight on them at all.
Oh, gosh. I mean, yeah, I think about that all the time as someone who's in the media and as a journalist and when do I need to tell people about this? And when am I just, feeding the flame of this group that, really is acting in bad faith? It's a tough call. And I've probably made mistakes in the past. So, of course, the Boise Library, the current downtown library, there was this moment in time a few years ago, previous mayor, this big attempt to have a brand new library that was going to be built by, this famous architect. And it didn't happen. We still have the same downtown library. It still is this absolutely vital place. Do you ever go in there? Or is that a place that you visit?
Yeah, of course. I wrote my very first book, which came out over 20 years ago now. It's called The Shell Collector. And I wrote a large chunk of it in the Boise Public Library.
Wow.
There's a story called, for a long time, this was Griselda's story. That was this long title to a story. And Boise Linen Supply plays a role in the story. And that's only because I looked out the window of the Boise Public Library on the second floor at Boise Linen Supply every day while I was working on that story. And I was part of Mayor Beater's effort. Moshe Safdie is this incredible architect. Oh my God. If you've ever been to the Singapore airport or seen the Salt Lake Library or the Vancouver Library.
Yeah.
And, his design was really compelling, but I think maybe some of the PR handling around the cabin and, of course, just the anxiety, rightfully, that people feel about growth in the city. Maybe it wasn't the right time
Yeah. And the conversation about, right, like what do we invest in right now? And with, growth and affordable housing being such a fever pitch crisis.
Exactly.
Oh gosh, yeah. I still think about that issue and that debate and where we are. I mean, personally, I would have loved to have like this, just temple to books in downtown, but there is something really cozy about our current library and really, amazing programming and things that come out of there all the time too.
Absolutely. Eventually, we're going to have to do something.
Clearly. Yep.
The vision was this is a place where you can have a business meeting, super fast internet. You'll have a room to show slides. You can have tons of events. We still need a kind of medium-sized event space.
The third space that you mentioned, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that something like that original project idea does is it forces you to try to think about what is this place going to look like in 20 and 30 years, and we're just not going to be able to stop people from coming here. And how do we serve them all? And it's the same thing with affordable housing. It's like there's going to be more demand, and how do we serve all these people who are coming?
Yeah, same issue, just two sides of that coin, I think, in a lot of ways. How does it feel to be a writer right now with all these attacks on ideas and books? What does that feel like?
It's an immense privilege to be a writer with readers. Pressure is privilege. Or I think that's what Billie Jean King said. There's something amazing line. I think it was even the name of one of her books. So I tried when I would start to get quite anxious to be like, especially when Trump was challenging the results of the election, and I was trying to finish this novel. I was like, wow, all these institutions that I took for granted as a kid, especially American democracy, are in danger right now and under threat. And that said, it's very hard for me to sit down and say, like, now I will do something important. Writing for me is play, and I need to get myself in a playful, non-anxious state to be able to create. So often it's just a trick of putting on headphones and just blocking out the internet and trying to work. A novel is not a place to break news. A novel is a place to think long-term about things and ask questions, not to answer questions. So often, if I get too mired down in the moment-by-moment, needle-flipping, oscillating thing that is contemporary news, I find it's really paralyzing as an artist. So often I'm trying to say, not so much what does it feel like as a writer in this moment, as much as how do I just ask questions about what it means to be here for this incredibly brief moment that we get to be here, even if we're here for 80 years. It's such a finger snap in the geologic and human history of our planet. And just ask questions, what does that mean? How do we experience beauty? How could we be kinder to each other? What are connections across time and space? And that can usually start to soothe some of my anxiety about, when you look at your phone and there's another alert about some big story.
Yeah. So notifications off, headphones on. Yep. With the success, that you've had, obviously, especially with All the Light We Cannot See, your Pulitzer Prize winning novel, of course, you've become really widely known and in demand. You're traveling all around the world. You're talking with all kinds of important people. You're being interviewed by journalists everywhere. And yet you live right here in our comfortable small town kind of vibe, Boise, Idaho. Does it ever feel like you kind of have, feet in two worlds where you're living in this very big macro global world and perspective, and then you're right down here in Boise and you're, going to the library and you're going to your favorite brewery and you're hanging out in town? What is that like?
It's nice when you put it like that, but it's just like my life. We live here. Our kids just graduated from Boise High in May, and it was just an incredible place to raise kids, especially in the new wild west of smartphones, where, as everybody listening to this knows, you can drive 35 minutes and suddenly their phones don't work, and you can actually still raise kids in a way that they have to look you in the eye and throw rocks in the river. And that was the best gift this place ever gave us, is that connection with place, and it still gives me that. Yes, I get to meet some really interesting people, but I'm still just grinding. Like, I'm just working on sentences every day. And, you don't want tons of distraction, and you definitely don't want any ego getting in the mix of any of that stuff. So Boise is the perfect place for me to do that. When I go out with my friends, we don't talk about who's longlisted for the National Book Awards. There's not a competitive vibe. We're just talking about like, will Boise State fire their coach or whatever? It's just
the age-old question, right? Yeah,
exactly. Or what fly is working on this stream right now, and that is such a gift. We're so blessed to be able to share this space with as few people as we can. So sometimes I think all the travel that's been introduced in my life helps me remember what a special place this is. You can go around the world and still never find places as special as the Middle Fork of the Salmon or Copper Basin or some parts of the White Clouds. So I'm so grateful that we get to be here.
Yeah. Your kids are in college now. So, you don't have the anchor of them in high school. Do you see yourself staying in Boise for the long haul?
Yeah, I think so. My wife, Shauna, grew up here and her parents are here. And, we still have tons of friends here. And as you get older, as everybody listening knows, it's a little harder to just start your friendships all over again. Sometimes, you get tempted, you get into a city and you're like, oh, the energy here is so exciting. It's just in Paris and the food in Paris and the bakeries. And, now they have this, there's so many great bike lanes there. So I'm riding this e-bike all over the place. I'm like, oh, this is how a city could be. But when you come back here, you're like, it's quiet. Like, this quiet is so nice.
Okay, if you were to write a novel where Boise is the main character, what transition would you want that character to go through? Or like a revelation that you would want Boise, the character, to come to through this novel?
Wow. Oh my gosh. My immediate instinct is what I would be most interested in is railroads and mining and Chinese laborers, the history of racial persecution that's kind of tucked inside our history.
Hidden away in a lot of ways. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know what transition the character would necessarily have to go through as much as, along the journey of chasing my own curiosity. This is probably the case for all my books. Try to exhaust whatever energy that I feel. Usually you can feel a little lightning running through some idea. And so when I'm like, okay, a story that hasn't been told much is that the railroads were built primarily in Idaho by Chinese laborers. And I am not an expert on this at all, Frankie, but there's something interesting about that. There's people coming here, living in these mountains. And what are their stories? That's pretty interesting to me. I don't know if I'll ever decide to chase that because I'm also interested in fur.
Oh.
And I haven't thought about this in 15 years, but beaver hats. Don't think about like a beaver cap, like a Davy Crockett cap, but a nice hat like the Abraham Lincoln wore was often made from beaver fur because it was like really, you could crush it and it would go right back to its shape and it was really water repellent. And so these fur trading companies work their way down the snake, just taking out beavers. And there's such an ecological pivot point because they build dams and create big wetlands that removing this enormous quantity of beavers from these ecosystems all at once because of a human fashion, really disoriented and reshaped the topography of our state. So there's something about that too that's interesting.
Ooh, I love that. I would totally read a novel around that.
Okay, cool.
Thank you so much. This has been amazing. This has been such a fun conversation. And yeah, really love talking to you about Boise, but also about writing and about just what it's like to be an author today in Boise, Idaho. This is really cool.
Well, thanks so much, Frankie, and keep up the great work.
And here's some good news to know today. The Idaho Statesman is reporting that for the first time in Bogus Basin's 80-year history, winter operations have been extended through May 6th. In the last couple of weeks, the area got almost 4 feet of snow, and this year Bogus opened on November 19th, which was the earliest in 28 years. That's all for today here on CityCast Boise. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend? Leave us a review and subscribe to our Hey Boise newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning to talk about why the geese in Boise are acting like massive jerks right now. Bye!